Your mind refuses to fall asleep because it is still fighting a battle that ended hours ago. You replay conversations that no one else remembers. You analyze text messages, searching for hidden meanings that probably do not exist. While everyone else seems to move through life effortlessly, you are stuck inside your head, building entire worlds out of tiny moments. This is not just overthinking. This is your brain working against you in ways you never understood. And by the end of this, you will see exactly why it happens and what it actually means about how your mind works. People who think too much are not smarter. They are not more careful. They are trapped in a loop their brain created as protection, but that protection has become a prison. Let me explain how this works.
Your brain has a feature called the default mode network. It turns on when you are not focused on anything specific. For most people, this network stays quiet, but for overthinkers, it never shuts off. It keeps running scenarios, even when there is no problem to solve. Your brain thinks it is keeping you safe by preparing for every possible outcome, but instead, it is exhausting you. This network was useful thousands of years ago. If you heard a noise in the bushes, overthinking kept you alive. Your ancestors who paused and imagined every danger survived longer. But now, you're using that same system to imagine what your boss meant by that email. The threat is not real anymore, but your brain has not updated its software.
Now, here is where it gets strange. Overthinkers are often highly sensitive to social cues. You notice micro-expressions that others miss. You catch the slight change in someone's tone. This sounds like a gift, but your brain does not stop at noticing. It builds entire stories around those tiny signals. Someone takes 2 seconds longer to reply, and your mind creates 15 different reasons why they might be upset with you. This happens because your brain is wired for pattern recognition. It wants to find connections everywhere. That skill helped early humans survive. But in modern social situations, it creates false patterns. You start seeing rejection where there is only distraction. You interpret silence as anger when it is just someone being busy.
Overthinkers also struggle with something called intolerance of uncertainty. Your brain hates not knowing. It would rather create a negative story than sit with the discomfort of uncertainty. So when someone does not text back, your mind fills the gap. It tells you they are angry, or they do not care, or you said something wrong. The truth is usually simpler. They got distracted. But your brain refuses to accept that simple answer. There is another layer most people do not talk about. Overthinking is often linked to hypervigilance. This comes from growing up in environments where you had to read the room to stay safe. Maybe you learned early that you needed to predict moods to avoid conflict. Maybe you had to stay alert to emotional shifts around you. That skill became automatic. Now you can't turn it off, even when you are safe.
Your brain learned that thinking ahead equals safety, so it keeps scanning for threats, even when there are none. You walk into a room and immediately assess everyone's mood. You replay your words to check for mistakes. You plan conversations that will never happen. This constant scanning drains your energy, but your brain believes it is protecting you. Overthinkers also experience something called thought suppression rebound. When you try not to think about something, your brain thinks about it more. Tell yourself to stop worrying about that mistake you made, and your mind brings it up 5 more times. This happens because monitoring whether you are thinking about something requires thinking about it. You create the exact loop you are trying to escape. Here is something most people get wrong. Overthinking is not the same as problem solving. Problem solving moves toward a solution. Overthinking moves in circles. You revisit the same thoughts without new information. You ask the same questions but never answer them. Your brain confuses repetition with productivity. It feels like you are doing something useful, but you are just rewinding the same scene over and over. There is also a hidden emotional component. Overthinking often covers up feelings you do not want to face. It is easier to think about why someone acted a certain way than to admit you feel hurt. It is safer to analyze every angle than to sit with disappointment or fear. Your brain uses thoughts as a shield against emotions, but those emotions do not disappear. They just hide under layers of analysis.
People who think too much also tend to have a strong inner critic. This voice is not trying to hurt you, it is trying to protect you from external criticism by getting there first. If you criticize yourself before anyone else can, you feel more in control. But this backfires. The inner critic becomes harsher than any real person would be. You end up creating the exact pain you were trying to avoid. Another hidden cause is unprocessed experiences. Your brain keeps bringing up the past because it has not fully integrated what happened. Something was left unresolved, so your mind keeps trying to solve it. You replay that conversation because part of you is still looking for a different ending. You rethink that decision because emotionally you have not accepted the outcome. Your brain is not broken, it is trying to complete something that feels incomplete.
Overthinkers also struggle with decision-making. Every choice splits into 1,000 possibilities. You imagine every outcome, every risk, every regret. This happens because your brain overestimates the importance of being right. It believes that if you just think long enough, you will find the perfect answer. But most decisions do not have perfect answers, and the cost of overthinking often outweighs the cost of choosing wrong. There is something else happening beneath the surface. Overthinking can be a way to avoid action. As long as you are still thinking, you do not have to do anything. You do not have to have the hard conversation. You do not have to make the choice. You do not have to risk being wrong. Thinking feels productive, but sometimes it is just procrastination dressed up as preparation.
Many overthinkers also deal with perfectionism. Your brain tells you that if you think through every angle, you can avoid mistakes. But perfectionism is not about excellence. It is about fear. Fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of not being enough. So you think and rethink, trying to create a version of events where you cannot be criticized. But that version does not exist. Here is what most people never realize. Overthinking is not a personality flaw, it is a coping mechanism that outlived its usefulness. At some point it helped you, it kept you safe, or made you feel in control. But now it is doing the opposite. It is keeping you stuck, it is stealing your peace, and your brain does not know how to let go, because it still believes this is what keeps you safe. The hardest part is that overthinking feels productive. It feels like you are working through something, but awareness without action is just another loop. You can understand why you overthink and still keep doing it. Knowledge alone does not change the pattern. You have to interrupt the cycle, not just observe it. Your brain will resist this. It will tell you that you need to think just a little more. It will convince you that this time is different. But every time you follow that voice, you strengthen the loop. The way out is not more thinking. It is learning to sit with the discomfort of not knowing. It is letting thoughts pass without grabbing onto them. It is trusting that you do not need to solve everything in your head. Most overthinkers wait for the thoughts to stop on their own, but they will not. Your brain has practiced this pattern for years. It has become the default response to uncertainty, to fear, to discomfort. Breaking that pattern requires something different. It requires you to notice the loop without feeding it, to see the thought without following it down the rabbit hole. Here is the biggest revelation that changes everything. Overthinking is not about the thoughts themselves. It is about your relationship with your thoughts. You believe that every thought deserves attention, that every worry needs to be solved, that every question must be answered. But thoughts are not commands. They are just mental events. They come and go. You do not have to attend to all of them.
The people who break free from overthinking do not stop having intrusive thoughts. They just stop treating those thoughts as emergencies. They notice the thought, acknowledge it, and let it move on. They do not wrestle with it. They do not try to argue it away. They just stop feeding it attention. And without attention, the thought loses power. Your mind is not broken. It is doing exactly what it was trained to do. But you can train it differently, not by thinking harder, but by thinking less. Not by solving every worry, but by letting some of them exist without solutions. This is not about controlling your mind. It is about changing what you do when your mind spirals. If this helped you see your own patterns more clearly, subscribe so you do not miss what comes next.